Johnny Depp. I think he goes mad at one stage. Does it bother you, though, that level of attention?
I don't deal with it very well.
What do you do?
Cry a lot. Then they get really freaked out. It's crazy. It's completely crazy. He's wicked and doesn't do quite as...
When Pirates of the Caribbean first set sail in 2003, no one could have predicted it would become one of the biggest film franchises in history. At its heart was a young, rising star, Keira Knightley, only 17 at the time, and an already iconic actor, Johnny Depp, who transformed Captain Jack Sparrow into a legend. But behind the laughter, sword fights, and ocean waves, there were secrets on set that fans never knew, moments of tension, admiration, and confusion that shaped both of their lives in ways the cameras never captured. For years, Keira remained silent about what really happened while filming alongside Depp. She defended him during controversies and praised his talent, but she also hinted that her experience wasn't as simple as it seemed. Now, after years of reflection, she's finally ready to tell her side about Johnny's unpredictable moods, his quiet acts of kindness, and the strange energy that surrounded him as the Pirates phenomenon exploded. Insiders on set described Johnny as brilliant but complicated, while Keira's maturity and professionalism earned her respect far beyond her age. Yet even as their chemistry lit up the screen, there were days when that connection was tested by fame, pressure, and Johnny's increasingly erratic behavior. In this story, we'll uncover what Keira Knightley really witnessed on the set of Pirates of the Caribbean, and why her revelations about Johnny Depp have left fans stunned, heartbroken, and questioning everything they thought when Keira Knightley was cast in Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. She was just 17, barely out of school, still unsure of her place in Hollywood. She had already made an impression in Bend It Like Beckham, but nothing could have prepared her for the massive production she was about to join. On the other side stood Johnny Depp, already a Hollywood icon with decades of experience and a reputation for being both mysterious and magnetic. For Keira, meeting Johnny for the first time was surreal. "He was larger than life," she once said in an interview. "There's something about Johnny. He doesn't just walk into a room, he transforms it." His arrival on set wasn't loud or boastful. He had this calm energy, the kind that drew people in. Everyone, from the directors to the costume crew, seemed to orbit around him. But behind that charm, there was an unpredictability that made every encounter with him a new experience. Sometimes he was warm and playful, cracking jokes and improvising lines that had the entire crew laughing. Other times he was distant, almost lost in thought, like he was living in another world. Director Gore Verbinski often described Depp as a creative storm. He would show up to set with new ideas for Jack Sparrow's walk, his voice, even his jewelry. The studio wasn't sure what to make of it at first. Disney executives reportedly worried that his portrayal was too strange, too unpredictable. "But Keira, she saw genius. He was fearless," she said. He didn't care if people thought he was odd. He knew who he was trying to play, and he trusted that completely. Their first scenes together were full of that strange energy, a mix of innocence and danger. Keira later admitted she was nervous acting opposite Depp. "I kept thinking, this is Captain Jack Sparrow, and I'm just trying not to forget my lines." Yet, from the very beginning, Johnny treated her with surprising kindness. While other stars might have dismissed a young co-star, Depp made an effort to put her at ease. He would pull her aside between takes, cracking jokes or sharing stories about his early career. He told her about working with Tim Burton, about being typecast, and how he'd learned to stop worrying about what critics thought. "Johnny had this ability to make you feel like you were the only person in the room," Keira once said. "He'd look you in the eye when you spoke, and that made you feel seen, respected." But there were moments when his mood would shift without warning. Crew members described seeing him isolate himself before filming, sitting quietly in a corner, cigarette in hand, eyes distant. Some said he was just getting into character, while others whispered that he was battling personal demons, the kind of pain fame couldn't hide. Still, Keira, young and impressionable, didn't see the darker undertones. To her, Johnny was both mentor and mystery, someone who moved through Hollywood with grace and rebellion in equal measure. During press tours, she often spoke of how much she admired him. "Johnny was protective," she said. "He never made me feel like the young one on set. He treated me as an equal." Their chemistry translated effortlessly to the screen. Elizabeth Swann and Jack Sparrow became one of the most iconic duos in film. But as filming went on, Keira began noticing subtle cracks, the long hours, the unpredictable behavior, the quiet moments when Johnny seemed consumed by something deeper. She didn't understand it then, but years later, she would describe that period as her first glimpse into the cost of being Johnny Depp. For Keira Knightley, Pirates of the Caribbean wasn't just a movie. It was a coming-of-age story, both on-screen and off. And it all began with one unforgettable impression, a man whose brilliance was undeniable, but whose darkness was already starting to show, as filming for Pirates of the Caribbean stretched on. The atmosphere on set became increasingly unpredictable, and much of it revolved around Johnny Depp. His portrayal of Captain Jack Sparrow was revolutionary, but it was also the result of a deeply unconventional process that often left the cast and crew wondering what version of Johnny they'd get each day. Keira Knightley, still a teenager navigating her first massive Hollywood production, found herself observing it all up close. She later described the set as electrifying but chaotic, a place where every day felt different depending on Johnny's mood. When he was in high spirits, the energy was infectious. Depp would show up cracking jokes, improvising lines that weren't in the script, and pushing scenes into hilarious new directions. He'd bring laughter between takes, even dancing around in costume just to keep the crew smiling under the scorching Caribbean sun. When Johnny was light, one crew member recalled, the entire set felt like a party. But there were days when things took a darker turn. Depp would arrive quiet, withdrawn, eyes hidden behind sunglasses. He'd avoid conversation, pacing alone or sitting on the ship's deck, lost in his thoughts. No one dared to interrupt. Keira once said, "You could tell when something was weighing on him. You just didn't know what." Rumors began to swirl among the crew, whispers of personal struggles, long nights, and tension with the studio. Some said the Disney executives were frustrated with how strange Depp's performance had become, fearing that his slurred, drunken pirate mannerisms might ruin the movie. But Keira, even at her young age, defended him. He was creating something special, she later said. You could feel it. He was redefining what a hero could be. Still, Johnny's unpredictable behavior sometimes created tension during long shoot days. Scenes would have to be reshot because he decided to change dialogue at the last minute or improvise entirely new sequences. For a newcomer like Keira, this was both intimidating and inspiring. She once recalled a moment when Johnny suddenly threw a prop across the set mid-scene, shocking everyone. No one knew it was coming, not even the director. But it worked. It made the moment real, she said. He had this instinct that was unlike anyone I've ever seen. Behind the charisma, however, there was something heavy about Johnny, something that Keira later admitted she sensed but couldn't name. Crew members noticed he often isolated himself between takes, sometimes spending hours alone on the ship's deck, quietly playing guitar or sketching in a notebook. One production assistant described it as beautifully sad, like he carried an entire ocean of emotion inside him. Keira, meanwhile, learned to navigate the waves of his moods. She gave him space when he needed it, and followed his lead when he wanted to improvise. Their scenes became electric, a dance of discipline and chaos that somehow always worked. Still, there were moments that unsettled her. During a particularly long night shoot, she remembered Johnny suddenly leaving the set mid-take, vanishing for nearly an hour. The crew stood silently, unsure whether to keep rolling or call a break. When he finally returned, he was calm, almost eerily so, and delivered one of his best performances of the entire film. It was like he had to step away to find the emotion, Keira said. As filming continued, Keira began to see the price Johnny paid for being Johnny Depp. The weight of fame, expectation, and personal demons was ever present. He could be generous and gentle one moment, and unreachable the next. Yet despite everything, he never treated Keira with anything but kindness. She once told a journalist, "He was unpredictable, yes, but he was also kind. He protected me." I'll always remember that. By the end of filming, Keira had learned more about acting, fame, and human fragility than any acting class could have taught her. She saw firsthand the thin line between genius and chaos, and how, for Johnny Depp, that line blurred more often than not. Little did she know, what she witnessed then was only the beginning of a much bigger storm, one that would follow Johnny for the rest of his life, and one she'd be forced to reflect on years later when the world began to question the man behind Captain Jack Sparrow, knew about the beloved Captain Jack Sparrow. When Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl became a global phenomenon. It catapulted Keira Knightley from a promising newcomer to an international star overnight. But with fame came questions about her experience, her chemistry with Johnny Depp, and the truth about what really happened behind the scenes. For years, Keira remained remarkably quiet. While tabloids tried to paint stories of tension or romance between her and Johnny, she refused to play along. When asked in interviews about his on-set behavior, she gave short, diplomatic answers, praising his talent, his eccentricity, and his kindness. Yet those who knew her best said her silence wasn't out of fear. It was out of respect. Johnny was like an enigma, Keira said years later. You never knew the whole picture, and that's why I never wanted to add to the noise. Behind that loyalty, though, was a mix of admiration and unease. Keira had seen things, moments when Johnny's behavior crossed from genius into chaos, times when his unpredictability made the cast nervous or the director quietly frustrated. But she also witnessed his gentleness, his quiet encouragement, his efforts to make her feel safe in an industry that often chews up young actors. She once recalled a night during filming in St. Vincent when a scene went wrong. Exhausted and near tears after multiple takes, she felt overwhelmed. Depp walked over, whispered a few words of encouragement, and made her laugh. "He reminded me that movies are supposed to be fun," she said. That moment changed everything for me. To her, that was the real Johnny, not the headlines or the whispers. A man of extremes, both fragile and brilliant, who carried more emotion than he ever let the world see. But as the years passed, the public's view of Johnny began to shift. His eccentricities that once seemed charming were now labeled troubling. Stories about his volatile personal life and struggles with addiction began to dominate the news. Reporters circled back to Keira, asking what she really saw on set. Again, she said little. "He was kind to me," she replied simply, "and I'll always be grateful for that." Her loyalty didn't go unnoticed. Many fans praised her for staying neutral, refusing to speak badly about a man she once admired deeply. Others accused her of avoiding the truth. But those who understood Keira's nature knew better. She wasn't protecting Depp out of fear or image. She was protecting the memories of a young woman who learned about the price of fame too soon. In later interviews, Keira admitted that filming Pirates taught her the complexities of working with creative geniuses. "You see people give everything to their art," she said. "But sometimes that kind of passion comes with pain. I saw that in Johnny. There were subtle signs, the exhaustion, the long silences between takes, the way he sometimes disappeared after filming." But she never judged him. "He had his battles," she said softly. "We all do. His were just harder to hide." Her silence became a quiet act of compassion, one that mirrored her growing wisdom. As scandals around Depp escalated years later, Keira remained one of the few former co-stars who never spoke harshly about him. Even when others publicly distanced themselves, she chose empathy over condemnation. "Everyone has their version of the truth," she told The Guardian in a reflective interview. "I only know mine, and mine is that Johnny was kind, professional, and taught me a lot about surviving in this business." Still, beneath her calm tone, there was a hint of sadness, the kind that comes from watching someone you once admired fall from grace. When asked if she was shocked by what happened later in his life, she paused and said quietly, I think he always carried that darkness. I just didn't understand it back then. In a world that demanded headlines and sound bites, Keira's restraint spoke louder than any scandal ever could. She had seen both the beauty and the pain of Johnny Depp up close, and instead of exploiting it, she chose to protect it. Because for Keira Knightley, silence wasn't avoidance. It was respect for a man whose brilliance and brokenness were forever intertwined. Years after Pirates of the Caribbean turned her into a global star, Keira Knightley has built a career defined by depth, grace, and quiet strength. She moved far beyond Elizabeth Swann, choosing roles that challenged her, from Atonement to The Imitation Game. But no matter how far she went, her time alongside Johnny Depp remained a defining chapter in her story, one she has never forgotten, and one she still speaks about with a mix of warmth and melancholy. When asked about Depp in recent years, Keira's tone is reflective, not defensive, not scandal-seeking. "Johnny was a force," she said in a 2023 interview. "Working with him at such a young age taught me that brilliance often comes with complexity." For Keira, the Pirates experience was both magical and sobering. She witnessed firsthand how someone at the top of Hollywood could be both adored and misunderstood. She remembered the days when Johnny was endlessly charming, cracking jokes, making everyone laugh, and turning chaos into creativity. But she also recalled moments when he seemed consumed by something invisible, the weight of fame, perhaps, or the ghosts of his own making. Johnny was unpredictable, she once admitted, but he had this incredible generosity. When he was present, he gave you everything. As the years rolled by and Johnny's public image began to fracture under the strain of legal battles and controversy, Keira remained noticeably absent from the public conversations about him. She neither defended nor condemned him. Instead, she chose to remember the man she worked with, the artist, the mentor, and the person who treated her with kindness when she was just starting out. In a 2021 interview, when pressed about the storm surrounding Depp, Keira simply said, "I can only speak from my experience. And my experience was that he was gentle, funny, and wildly creative." Those words carried weight, not because they revealed scandal, but because they revealed humanity. Behind her calm exterior, Keira's reflections reveal something more profound, a recognition of how fragile the line between art and self-destruction can be. She once said she learned an early lesson from watching Depp, that fame can both elevate and destroy. "He showed me what it costs to be extraordinary," she told a friend years later. And it's not a small price. Even now, when she looks back at those early Pirates films, Keira says she feels gratitude more than anything. "Those movies changed my life," she admitted, and Johnny was a huge part of that. But she's also honest about the emotional complexity of that time. There were moments when the energy on set was heavy, she said. You felt it. He carried so much inside him, but when the cameras rolled, it was like watching lightning strike. That lightning, that mix of pain and brilliance, defined Johnny Depp for decades. And for Keira, it became a lasting reminder that even the most gifted people often carry the deepest wounds. Today, Keira rarely attends Hollywood parties or seeks the spotlight. She lives quietly, raising her family and choosing her roles carefully. But when she occasionally speaks about her Pirates days, her words still carry the awe of a young woman who saw genius up close, and the empathy of someone who understands its cost. In a quiet moment during a recent podcast, she said something that perfectly captured her feelings. Sometimes you meet people who are unforgettable, not because they're perfect, but because they're real. Johnny was one of those people. For millions of fans, Pirates of the Caribbean will always be about adventure, humor, and the wild brilliance of Captain Jack Sparrow. But for Keira Knightley, it will forever be something deeper, a time of discovery, of learning, and of witnessing both the beauty and the fragility of human creativity. Her final reflection on Johnny Depp isn't one of scandal or regret. It's one of understanding, a quiet acknowledgement that beneath the fame, the rumors, and the chaos, there was a man who gave the world a character it would never forget. and who, for better or worse, taught a young actress the true meaning of compassion.